We begin with a truly sad and shocking story out of the world of NASCAR as the sports world mourns the sudden, shocking death of 41-year-old NASCAR legend Kyle Busch.
You think you have time. You think a cold is just a cold, and that the people you love will always be there tomorrow. Only weeks before, the strongest man, Kyle Busch, believed that too, right up until a hospital machine became the only sound in the room. His wife sat beside him as it happened, and in that unthinkable moment, she made him a promise. What she vowed in that room has finally surfaced, and it changes everything. The 4 words that ended her silence. For nearly 3 weeks, she had said almost nothing at all. Then, on the 10th of June, Samantha Busch opened Instagram and shared a single photograph that stopped the racing world cold. In the picture, she is standing on the grass at Charlotte Motor Speedway with her 2 children, and all 3 of them are staring at the number 8 that has been painted into the ground, the same number her husband Kyle drove before he died. You can imagine how long she sat with that photo before she found the courage to write anything. What she finally wrote was not angry, and it was not bitter. It was honest in a way that is almost hard to read. Watching Brexton back at the track is both heartbreaking and beautiful all at once. She began, because there are moments when I catch a glimpse of Kyle in him. The same determination, the same passion, the same spark. And for a second it feels like a piece of him is still right here with us. She went on to say something that became the heart of everything. These moments are incredibly hard, but they also remind me that Kyle's story isn't over. It lives on through the dreams he inspired and the 2 children he loved more than anything. And then came the line that millions of people would repeat for days. After all the pain and all the silence, she closed her message with 4 small words that carried the weight of a mountain. So, we race on. It was only 4 words, and that was all she offered. But here is what most people scrolling past that post never realized. Those 4 words were not the beginning of her story. They were the answer to a promise she had made in a place far darker than any racetrack, in a room where the machines were the only thing making noise. The promise made at his bedside. The room she was talking about was a hospital room in Charlotte, and the days that led her there happened so fast that the people closest to Kyle still struggled to believe it. Only days earlier, he had been racing. He had felt a cold coming on while competing on a tricky road course in the middle of May, and he even radioed his team to ask that a doctor meet him afterwards for a shot to help him push through. That was the kind of competitor he was. He won a truck race at Dover while feeling sick, and then he climbed back into a car for an exhibition race after that, refusing to let his body slow him down. Everything changed on the 20th of May. While running a practice session inside a racing simulator, Kyle suddenly became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, and the family quickly learned that what they had treated like a stubborn cold was something far more dangerous. The bacterial pneumonia in his lungs had been building for days, maybe even weeks, and it had turned into sepsis, a brutal infection that races through the body and overwhelms it from the inside. The next afternoon, on the 21st of May, Kyle Busch was gone at the age of 41. Sometime in those final hours, while the monitors beeped and the doctors fought a battle they could not win, Samantha leaned close to her husband and made him a vow. She did not share it with the world right away. She kept it private, the way you keep the most sacred things private. But weeks later, in that same Instagram message, she finally let everyone in. In the hospital, I made Kyle a promise, she wrote. I promised him that I would do everything I could to help our children pursue their dreams no matter what. Read that again and let it land. In the worst moment of her entire life, with her husband slipping away in front of her, she was not thinking about herself. She was thinking about Brexton and Lennox. And she was promising the man she loved that their children would never have to give up on the dreams he helped them build. Most of us make promises we forget within a week. We promise to call someone back, to start over on Monday, to fix the thing we have been ignoring. A promise made at the side of a dying husband is a completely different kind of weight. It follows you into every quiet morning and every sleepless night. And barely 2 weeks after she made it, Samantha was already being asked to keep it, on the very ground where her husband should have been standing beside her. A green number 18 and a sticker named Rowdy. In the first week of June, less than 2 weeks after he lost his father, 11-year-old Busch buckled into a small car and rolled out onto the track at Charlotte for a youth race called the Summer Shootout. The car he drove was a bright green machine wearing the number 18, the number his dad made famous during the most successful years of his career. Stuck to that car was a single word that told you everything about why he was there. The word was Rowdy, the old nickname fans had been shouting at his father for 20 years. The boy was carrying his dad onto the track with him. What happened next was bittersweet in the truest meaning of the word. In one race, he climbed from the back of the field and finished 6th. In another race, he led almost the entire way. And then, on the final lap, a friend slipped past him and stole the win at the last possible second. Brexton came home second, so close to victory that it must have stung badly. But the boy showed a maturity that left grown adults speechless. He congratulated the friend who beat him, he admitted he had made a small mistake, and he said simply that it felt really good to be racing again. There was no tantrum, and there was no excuse. There was only a kid who had clearly been raised by a fierce competitor who also knew how to lose with grace. Before the racing even began, the family gave Kyle a goodbye that left the grandstands in tears. Kyle's own father, Brexton's grandfather, climbed into a car and drove a slow honorary lap, while the other drivers held an empty space in their formation, the spot where Kyle should have been. Brexton stood at the flag stand and waved the green flag himself, sending his grandfather around the track in his dad's honor. Watching over all of it was Kyle's brother, Kurt, who had posted a short message of support before the race. He kept it simple, the same way Samantha had. "Go get him, Brex." The family was rallying around this child, lifting him up, keeping the promise alive in real time. But Brexton was not the only child Kyle left behind, and the promise his mother made did not stop with him. There was a little girl in this family too, and a tiny gift waiting in the garage that would break your heart. The little sister and a cart in the garage. Her name is Lennox, and she is only 4 years old. She is far too young to understand that the daddy who used to lift her into victory lane is never coming back. While her older brother chases checkered flags, she is still learning how to be a big girl. In the same message where Samantha revealed her promise, she wrote about Lennox too, and the detail she shared is the kind of thing that sits in your chest long after you read it. She explained that they had just bought the little girl a cart for her 4th birthday. "If Lennox wants to get behind the wheel," she wrote, "it won't be the same as having Kyle by her side, but we will do our absolute best." What makes the promise so powerful is what Samantha refused to do. She did not turn her children into a project meant to honor a dead man. She made it clear that racing has to stay their choice and not hers. "It wasn't a dream Kyle chose for him," she said of Brexton. "It was something they shared." She added that if one day either child wanted to walk away from racing and chase something completely different, that was perfectly okay, too. The promise was never really about cars. It was about dreams, whatever those dreams turned out to be. You start to understand why she keeps returning to the racetrack, even though every single visit reopens the wound. For nearly 20 years, that track was home. It was where she and Kyle fell deeper in love, where their children took their first steps, and where the best memories of their entire life together were made. As she put it, when so much of her world suddenly feels strange and unfamiliar, the racetrack is one of the only places that still feels like home. Yet the more you learn about the man she lost, the more you realize the public never truly knew him. The Kyle Busch that millions cheered and booed on Sunday afternoons was only half the story. The real man revealed himself in the smallest of places, inside a few text messages he sent the day before he died. The private Kyle, his last texts revealed. For most of his career, Kyle Busch was the man fans loved to hate. They called him rowdy, and they called him the wild thing. He feuded with other drivers, he spoke his mind when he probably should have stayed quiet, and he made enemies as easily as he won races. For years, he was the villain of the sport. The driver, half the grandstand, showed up hoping to watch him lose. But there was another Kyle hiding behind that helmet, and one of the men who knew him best finally pulled back the curtain. Dale Earnhardt Jr., a racing legend and one of Kyle's oldest rivals, went on his podcast not long after the death and shared something that left fans in pieces. The two men had spent years barely tolerating each other. Their feud was real, and it ran deep. But in recent times, they had quietly made peace, and they had even started planning to race together for fun in a smaller series. Dale revealed that they were texting back and forth the very day before Kyle died, working out the details. Kyle asked which number he should run, and Dale told him he could pick anything he wanted. The number Kyle chose was the Dale Jr. 8, the famous red number Dale had driven during the biggest years of his own career. It was a sign of deep respect from one former enemy to another. Dale told him he could absolutely run it. Then Kyle sent the very last text in their conversation. It was a small explosion emoji followed by two simple words: race fans. That was Kyle Busch with his guard down. He was not the angry villain the cameras loved to show, but a grown man who still got giddy like a kid at the thought of racing for the pure joy of it. The people closest to him kept telling the same kind of story. His car owner, Richard Childress, talked about taking Kyle hunting, about a friendship that grew far beyond the racetrack, and about how Kyle had started bringing little Brexton along too. Just 2 days before he collapsed, Kyle had spent an entire day go-karting with his son, doing the exact thing his family is now fighting so hard to protect. That is the cruel twist hiding inside this whole story. The fiercest and most stubborn and most competitive driver of his generation spent his final healthy days simply being a friend and a father. His last messages were not about trophies, and they were not about grudges. They were about helping a friend and chasing a little more joy with the people he loved. When he was gone, those people, along with an entire sport, found themselves searching for a way to say goodbye to a man who never knew how to slow down. A brother's goodbye and a sport that stopped. No one carried a heavier silence than Kurt Busch, Kyle's older brother. The two of them had raced against each other since they were boys, pushing little cars around makeshift tracks long before either one ever dreamed of a championship. Their relationship had its rough patches over the years, the way most brothers do, but the bond underneath was unbreakable. For weeks, Kurt said nothing in public. Then, he finally shared a message that read like a man trying to hold himself together. He thanked everyone for their love and support, and he reflected on the days when he and Kyle would race anything they could get their hands on. He wrote that they were far more than just fierce competitors, that they pushed each other and learned from each other, and that no trophy or championship could ever measure the impact his brother had on his life. Then he ended with the words that finished off anyone still holding back tears. "My heart is broken, but I know your spirit will always ride with me. Rest easy, little brother." The grief was not contained to one family. The entire sport came to a complete stop to honor him. At the biggest race of the Charlotte season, the famous Coca-Cola race held in late May, the tributes poured out one after another. They painted a black number 8 into the infield grass. Then came the moment that gave everyone chills. On the 8th lap of the race, the broadcast went completely silent, and fans across the grandstand raised 8 fingers into the air. It was a tribute to a number, but it was really a tribute to a man. The family stood together on the front stretch as bagpipes played, surrounded by the very drivers Kyle had battled for 2 decades. Kurt walked out and laid roses across the painted number. A leader of the sport spoke directly to the children, telling Brexton and Lennox that their dad loved them with all his heart, and promising the family that they would be part of the racing world forever. His team made a promise of its own. They announced that they would park the number 8 and would not let anyone else drive it. The car would sit waiting, reserved for one person and one person only. Ready for the day Brexton is old enough to claim it himself. Even at the legendary Indianapolis 500 that same weekend, a driver ran a car carrying Kyle's old number 18, so his memory could ride along there too. The whole racing world was reaching out at once, trying to hold up a family that had just been knocked to its knees. All of that love, as beautiful as it was, could not change what waited for Samantha when the cameras turned off and the crowds went home. We race on. When the tributes faded and the noise finally died down, what remained was a young widow and 2 children trying to figure out how to live inside a house that suddenly felt far too quiet. A few days before she revealed her promise, Samantha had shared a first message thanking the world for carrying her family through the darkest stretch of their lives. She did not pretend to be strong. She wrote that their hearts were absolutely shattered, and she admitted there were moments when the weight of the loss felt impossible to carry. She leaned hard on her faith, saying she could feel God's presence and arms wrapped tightly around them through every prayer and every kind stranger. The world sees the brave Instagram post and the strong mother standing tall at the racetrack. The world does not see the late nights, the empty side of the bed, or the small voice of a 4-year-old asking a question that has no good answer. It would be easy to remember Kyle Busch only for the numbers. He was a champion twice over, and he won more races across the sport than any driver who ever lived. For years, he was the man fans showed up purely to boo. Yet, by the end, something remarkable had happened. The same crowds that once jeered him had slowly come to love him, won over by his honesty, his fire, and the devotion he showed to his family. But Samantha is not asking anyone to remember the trophies. She is asking the world to remember the dad who spent his free days go-karting with his son and buying a cart for his little girl. She is making absolutely sure that the dreams he helped build do not die along with him. So when she ended her message with those 4 small words, she was not just describing a racetrack. She was describing a way of surviving the unthinkable. No matter how heavy the grief becomes, and no matter how empty the seat beside her feels, she and her children are choosing to move forward and keep his memory alive. So, we race on. What do you think it really takes for a mother to make a promise like that and keep it while her own heart is still in pieces? Share your thoughts in the comments.